When we're talking about functional assessment and looking through that as with a culturally sensitive lens, some families might be family focused, meaning in some cases, families might involve a lot of extended family members in the process of functional assessment. Parvs was mentioning a lot of South Asian families often have their grandparents involved because, again, filial piety, they're higher up. And then the grandparents are the key decision makers, and the parents themselves look up to the grandparents for advice and help making some of those decisions. Sometimes these family members, they might live, extended family might live with the families, with the children, so they are heavily involved in a child's everyday routine. And if you're targeting a routine that involves an extended family member, that's really important and key to have them involved in that process. And sometimes they may not be involved in the process, but because they are the key decision makers in the family, they do need to be involved in part of that process. That's really important. Versus you have families that might be more child focused, so you have a nuclear family, it's just child, parents maybe just child and single parent, and they are able to, that's the team that you're going to be working with. Families that might be more child-focused have an idea and they feel more comfortable with the concept of every single person in that child's environment must change the way they interact with their child to decrease problem behaviors from happening. That might be a very comfortable concept for them versus families that might be a little bit more family-focused, that might be more of a stretch and challenge for them. Some families might be past-focused. They focus on things that the children couldn't do, past interventions that didn't work, and then they tend to ruminate on that. Versus families you might have that are more future-focused, that they're willing to, not willing, but they want to know certain strategies that they can start working on right away. Just because family focus and past focus is kind of on that end of the spectrum, that doesn't mean that they go hand in hand. You can have families that are very family-focused, but really future-driven as well. Again, in the process of functional assessment, you are asking a lot of questions. Some families might feel uncomfortable and they might not be willing or reluctant to share some of this information. We'll be talking about this more again later about how to establish rapport, but that's going to be key. And we in BC are quite lucky because of the type of service model we have that we get to work with families in more of an with more intensity for longer durations of time. So we have the capacity to develop rapport first, and then maybe start working on a routine through a PBS plan and start a functional assessment. But we'll be talking a little bit more about different kind of strategies to develop rapport later on. Okay. So now we're going to want to discuss about meaningful lifestyle outcomes. Some families, in terms of choosing meaningful outcomes to teach, some families might focus on academics, versus some families might focus more on life self-help skills or leisure skills. I work with a lot of Japanese families. I have a privilege to work with a lot of different families from different cultural backgrounds, but when I work with Japanese families, I do find that they do tend to choose a lot of this independence, life skills, goals. And I think part of the culture in Japan is manners and respectful behavior out in the community is key. We even have this word called meiwaku. We don't have an English translation, but this concept of meiwaku roughly translates to being mindful and aware of others' people, about their personal space, and mindful about their time as well. And also don't be bothersome and don't cause trouble for other people. So this phrase meiwaku is often used by parents a lot to teach their children. So if you live in a culture where that's really key, working on skills like lining up quietly in the grocery store, sitting quietly on public transit, being mindful of other people's space is going to be really, really key. So I found a lot of Japanese families that I work with tend to want to focus on the right side here. Some families might have, I have another example. It's a literature by Mian Wang. It's called Implementing Positive Behavior Supports with Chinese American Families, Enhancing Cultural Competence. And in her writings, she introduces a 14-year-old girl called Meng. She moved from China to the States about 3 years ago at the time of her article. She was diagnosed with ADHD, and she lived with her parents and her grandma. And she was a great student. However, the school started to have some concerns because she was starting to exhibit some problem behaviors. One was she would fall asleep in class. The other one, she would engage in some minor property destruction. She would rip papers, she would rip books and tear books, which she wasn't doing before. So the school addressed this with the family, and they got another professional involved and started a PBS process. And with the functional assessment, they realized that Meng had a really hard time falling asleep and staying asleep throughout the night. they realized that she actually bedwetted sometimes, and Meng was really, really embarrassed about this, but that would keep her up at night. And Meng herself, through the process of functional assessment, because she was 14 and she participated, noted that I feel really stressed with a lot of the academic burdens I have. However, the grandparents and the parents at this point, at the beginning of the beginning stages of the PBS process, didn't really see why the school was super concerned about Meng's nighttime routine. The family's focus was really about her academics. And the family's goals, everybody in the family, they wanted to be academically successful, and that was really important to the family. So they didn't really realize, well, why is this nighttime routine very important? And the school and the professional did a wonderful job kind of reframing that and said, you know what, I see that is really important to your family that Meng does well in school. Maybe if we can think about if she's able to get a good night's rest throughout the evening, she's going to be that much more successful in school. If she has a little bit better of a balance between academics and leisure time, maybe that will alleviate some of her stressors and that will allow her to sleep better at nighttime. Do you think that's something that you guys would like to work on? Bam, parents were on board. Grandparents were on board as well. So that they did a great job kind of incorporating and not judging the family for wanting to focus on academics, but incorporating the family goal, which was family, everybody does well in academics, and that was really important, incorporating Meng's goal, which one she wanted more balance. And they came up with a really good routine that had a good, meaningful outcome. Okay. Discussing multi-component PBS plan and support. Again, some families may be more comfortable in the idea of changing the child's behavior and wanting to teach the child, these are the skills that I want her to learn so she can change, therefore her problem behaviors will go away. Some families, on the other hand, are comfortable with the idea of changing the environment. So how do we set up the environment for success? I think PBS is great because you can use the framework of PBS to address both. If you have a family that is more focused on wanting to change the child, there are strategies that go under the teaching column, teaching strategies, where you can incorporate that. But you can also have a discussion and try to have the family adopt some other new ideas in terms of using some antecedent strategies as well. Yeah. Okay, and then finally, some families might be more comfortable using reactive strategies of problem behavior, removal of items, sending their children to their room. And some families are more comfortable using preventative strategies. And again, you can incorporate all of these into your PBS plan, and we'll talk about the how in the upcoming slides. But how do we incorporate all of that so the family feels like their values are being acknowledged and that we're addressing meaningful life outcomes?